Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching this virtual training. This is the Student Organization Funding, otherwise known as SOF training video. Normally this training is done in person, but due to current circumstances we thought it would be best to have it be done virtually so that you guys could watch this from anywhere, anytime, and reference it later if you have any questions when you're filling out the form at any point. So without further ado, I'm Joel John, and I'm this year's Financial Vice President, and this is Fall 2020 Training. Here we go. So we're going to talk about SOF a lot, so let's start off about talking about what it is exactly. So SOF is a process where student organizations and club sports could apply to receive funding for events, initiatives, and goods. This funding is made available every academic semester and is funded by a $30 student activity fee, paid each semester by all full-time undergraduate students. This fee supports student organizations who put on events that serve the entire Marquette undergraduate community, or events/goods that are necessary to the operation of our over 300 student organizations on campus. The SOF committee is the chief manager and allocator of the student activity fee. Okay, so a little bit more about student organization funding. So like I said, each student pays $30 for the student activity fee, and 30% of that fee goes towards funding student organization funding. As far as who's eligible to apply for SOF funding, all good standing recognized student organizations that went to training, which this year means that you finished this video, could apply for funding. Again, the SOF committee reviews all applications, and I'm going to reference this a lot throughout the PowerPoint, but this website linked below is where you're going to find all information related to SOF, from the application to the reimbursement form I'll talk to, and even appeals and reallocations. And if that stuff sounds confusing, no worries. I promise we'll get a lot more into detail about that later on. So who actually sits on the SOF committee? In order to get as much diverse insight as we can, there are a few different members of MUSG that sit on the committee. So the executive vice president, who will be elected in September, and myself, the financial vice president, sit on the committee. The chair is the executive vice president, but for now, since they're not elected, I am kind of taking over that role a bit as FVP. In addition, we have our DESTA chair, which is Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice Committee, and we have 4 senators on the committee, as well as our staff advisor, who is Demetria Anderson. So as far as who do you contact at SOF, right now, I'm happy to be the point person, and I'm happy to answer any questions you guys might have. I linked my personal email as well as my MUSG.FVP email, and also you'll see the MUSG.finance email now. I frequently check my personal email and my FVP email, but the MUSG.finance email is actually linked to everyone who's on my finance team, which handles the reimbursement end. So for the most part, you could send a message to any of these, but if you want to contact me directly, your best bet is probably my personal email. So the SOF process has 4 main steps. First step is you're going to apply for funding. If you navigate to the MUSG website, you'll find the SOF application. I'll have some screenshots later on in this PowerPoint to give you a little bit more detail on that. Once you submit your application, the SOF committee will review it, and if there's any questions or concerns about your form, don't fret if you get an email from either myself or the executive vice president to set up a one-on-one meeting. That would just be to clarify any questions we had to make sure we're on the same page about what you're requesting from MUSG. So once your application is in order, we have no more questions. The committee will meet and will decide how much money we believe we should allocate towards your organization. We would love to give every organization as much money as they request, but please keep in mind that we do have limited funds that we're trying to fairly allocate to every student org that is asking us to support them financially. And once that application is reviewed and the allocation amount is decided, we'll move on to step 3. So accept or reject funding. You're going to receive an email from MUSG that has said, we have approved your form, and if it wasn't rejected, we are going to ask if you'd like to accept your funding. And so you're either going to respond in the email saying you accept or deny your allocated funds. Now, I know it might be a little strange to some of you that there'd ever be such a scenario where you want to deny your allocated funds, but we have had that happen a few times in the past, which is why we put it on here. Now, a scenario where that would happen is, let's say you wanted $2,000 for your event and you need it to make it happen. Without the $2,000, you cannot have that event. And let's say the committee reviews your form, they get back to you, say, hey, we're really sorry, we can only give you $1,000 or $500 for your event. And that would be a scenario where it'd be in everyone's best interest for you to deny your allocated funds, because unfortunately we couldn't give you all the funds you needed to have your event, and therefore there's really nothing you could do with that $1,000 because it's not going to go towards the event you wanted it to. And the benefit of you denying it is that although you can't use those funds, if you deny the funds, we'll put it back in our allocation pool, and that money could go towards another student organization that would really benefit from it. So that's a little bit about why you would ever want to reject funding. But that does happen minority of the time. Most of the time, student orgs accept funding and figure out a way to use it, even if it is less money than they were originally hoping for. So you've applied, you've accepted your funding. Now comes step 4, how to hold your event and apply for reimbursement. So first, hold your event or buy your capital good, take your trip. Whatever you applied for, whatever we allocated money for, do that using your organization's own money. Now, there are a few instances where OIE will cover that upfront payment for you, but I'll get into a little bit more detail into that. Majority in the past, we require student organizations to use their own money first because MUSG allocates SOF through a reimbursement process, which I'll get into a little bit more detail because there's a few things that go into consideration there. So once you pay for that with your organization's own money, you're going to want to keep your receipts for your purchases, and then you're going to apply for reimbursement through the MUSG office. Once my office processes that form, you will get a check. If you have any questions about what receipts you should have before your purchase, please feel free to reach out to myself or my finance team at musg.finance@mu.edu. We'll be happy to walk you through exactly what you need to submit to us for the reimbursement process to make sure you get that SOF money that you were originally allocated. So just again, for clarification, you have to, in most cases, pay for your good, pay for your event up front, and then MUSG will reimburse you and pay for that good through a reimbursement process after you initially pay for it yourself. As far as SOF guidelines go, before I get into the specifics, there is one major change that anyone who has done SOF in the past will have to realize, and that is due to the nature of current circumstances, we are no longer doing bulk funding forms. Instead, we're moving towards what would previously be known as spot funding. What that means is that SOF this year is a rolling funding process, meaning that we will review applications as we receive them and get back to you within 10 days of your application being received. In the past, there was a rule that said that more money would go towards bulk funding than spot funding, but this year that rule is no more, meaning that if you were expecting XYZ amount of money for an event from bulk funding, you would still be able to get allocated that amount. So we don't have that restriction here with this SOF process this semester. That being said, funds are still limited and we allocate until we run out of money. So if your organization knows what they want to apply for, it is in your best interest to fill out that application to let us know as soon as possible. Applications will be open from August 17th to November 10th. And once the SOF committee receives your application, you will get notification, hear back from us within 10 days of us receiving it. Also, you have to apply for SOF money 14 days before your event. If you do not, your application may automatically be rejected. Now, we understand there might be times where you really can't avoid applying at least 14 days before your event. If that's the case, reach out to us. That is a special circumstance that we would have to look through and talk through with you one-on-one. And you may not reapply for funding for any expense that was denied in the same funding period. So that just means if you were denied once, please don't submit an identical form again, hoping that, maybe they'll change their mind next week. If we didn't allocate you money, it's either because we just don't have enough money to, or we just felt like we gave you a justifiable amount overall with all the student org applications that we receive. Okay, so I talked a lot about the SOF application and how to fill it out. And now I want to tell you guys where exactly you could find it so you can get started as soon as possible. So to find the SOF allocation request form, which is the first form that you're going to want to send to us to get this whole process started, you're going to navigate to the MUSG website, which is musg.mu.edu/SOF. It's also written on the slide, and that application is going to go live Monday, August 17th at noon. And this arrow shows you that on the website. It's underneath SOF resources, and it is the first box. Again, SOF allocation request form. If you have any issues accessing the form, or for some reason you can't find it, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or the finance team again. Okay, so some recent SOF changes. Non-club sports conference funding. So previously, non-club sports could not apply for conference travel and lodging funding, but now we changed that so every student org, regardless of being non-club or club sport, could apply for conference travel and lodging funding. If you're a club sport, that doesn't affect you that much. If you're a non-club sport, a student organization, if you have any questions about that, please, common theme you probably heard, reach out with any questions. So something I've talked about before is normally we do a reimbursement process to give student orgs SOF funding unless you do an upfront payment through OEI. So in general, organizations will receive funding through reimbursement, meaning you will pay costs upfront as a student org. However, if your organization does not have the ability to pay upfront, meaning that you simply don't have the capital to pay for that good, you could work with OEI and MUSG to have some expenses funded upfront. Not all items can be funded upfront, but many can. On the request form that you'll fill out, you could select either of these options, and if you're requesting costs to be funded upfront, someone from OEI will follow up with you regarding next steps. So if that's confusing, let me try and clarify. If you would like to have OEI cover the upfront payment, that means that you as a student org don't have to pay a dime. You work with OEI, you tell them we are applying for this funding from MUSG, but we just can't cover the upfront cost. What's going to happen is OEI is going to cover that for you, and then MUSG, instead of reimbursing your student organization, we're going to reimburse OEI because they cover that expense for you. Now, if that sounds appealing, if that's something you would like to do, when you're filling out your SOF application that I showed you on the previous slide, there will be an option for you requesting for costs to be funded upfront. And when you do that, someone from OEI will follow up with you regarding next steps after you submit your application. Next, something that we've previously started doing is having one-on-one meetings with the EVP and FVP. So if you're going to submit your SOF application, and then you'll receive an email from the EVP or FVP to sign up for a one-on-one time. This will normally happen unless you have done SOF in the past. And the reason I say that is if you're a new student organization, you're filling out the SOF form, you might have some questions, you might have some misunderstandings, and that's perfectly okay. We just want to work with you to make sure that we understand what you're requesting, why you're requesting it, and how we could best serve you as a student organization. So I know some people are intimidated by this meeting. No means is it supposed to be intimidating. I hope I come off as friendly, and I know whoever the EVP is also going to be a friendly soul. We really just have this meeting scheduled so that we could best understand your form, so we could help serve your organization best. Yeah. And so once the EVP and myself are comfortable with your form, we're going to present it to the SOF committee, and then the committee will vote, as I said previously. So if you're a new student organization with no bank account or with little to no money in your bank account, please reach out to me to discuss your best options for upfront payment. So if you receive your allocation letter, allocation notification, and you would like to appeal your funding, you are allowed to do that. So appeals must be submitted within 1 week of receiving your funding allocation notification. And appeals are not reviewed by the SOF committee. They are reviewed by the MUSG budget committee. So I am the chair of this committee as financial vice president. The MUSG president as well as the MUSG program board representatives sit on this committee. We have 2 student senators, and then the MUSG financial advisor, Dr. Jennifer Reed, also sits on this committee. So if you're wondering why you might appeal a allocation notification, you have to meet one or more of the following criteria. Either MUSG incorrectly deemed the application insufficient, which means we said you didn't do this part of the application correctly, therefore we couldn't fund you. And you come back to us and you say, actually, I did this the right way. You guys just incorrectly misinterpreted what I wrote, or something of the like. Or the SOF committee decision was inconsistent or arbitrary. Or the committee did not follow its stated application procedures and policies. Now, to be honest, there are very few instances I've encountered in my past 3 years with MUSG's finance team where one of the appeals was correctly met. One of the criteria, my mistake, was correctly met for one of these appeals. That doesn't mean that it never happens. Sometimes it does, and the SOF committee is made up of humans, and humans aren't perfect. So if you feel like you'd like to appeal a funding allocation notification, please just reach out. We'll get you started. We're more than happy to re-review something that we did incorrectly. But just to clarify, you cannot appeal your funding simply because you do not like what we said as a SOF committee. So sometimes people like to appeal because they say, hey, I need this money, and I don't think you understand that I need it. In which case we'll come back to you and say, we did understand that. Unfortunately, we just have to allocate our money to many student organizations, and we can't meet everyone's requests to the fullest all the time. Okay, so the appeal form could also be found on the MUSG website, and this arrow shows you where you could find that. So sometimes you get allocated for what you asked for, and the world is perfect, and then something happens, your event falls through, you can no longer use that funding. Don't fret if this happens. I'm sorry to hear that, but you could apply for SOF reallocation. What that means is that you could tell us, I was planning to have this event in person, but since we can't have in-person events, we're doing a virtual event instead. Could I use this funding for our virtual event? And 9 out of 10 times we'll say, of course you can. We allocated you that money in our system. It's set aside for your student organization. So as long as you want to reallocate that towards something that we would normally fund through SOF, that's totally okay. So there are some criteria that must be met. The funds must have been allocated through SOF funding. It must be in the same semester, so your funds have to be, you can only reallocate funds for fall 2020 that you were given for fall 2020 initially, and you must have a compelling reason for reallocation. So that's just when you just have to tell us the story, what's going on with your student org. So if you'd like to apply for reallocation forms found on the SOF website or SOF page of the MUSG website. And just to clarify, you can't apply for more money this way. It's only to switch around funds you already have been allocated. And we ask that you submit your reallocation form at least 10 days in advance of when you intend to use the reallocated funds. Again, if you have any questions about this, reach out to myself or the finance team. Here's the SOF funding schedule. So the training sessions that are normally in person are online. You're listening to that right now, so great job of getting a head start. Applications open August 17th and they close November 10th. SOF meetings are weekly and decisions go out within 10 days of your application being received by the SOF committee. Again, if you'd like to appeal your allocation, you have 1 week after your allocation was sent out to you to do that. SOF guidelines. So everything you need to know before applying for student org funding. First and foremost, we cannot guarantee your organization financial support through student organization funding. While we'd love to, we can't guarantee that. So some things that we cannot fund. Capital goods you've already purchased, political candidate speaker fees, miscellaneous expense / personal goods. So this one's t-shirts, personalized uniforms, stuff to give away to spread club awareness. Events that have already occurred. Pretty much we can't fund something that's already happened. Charitable / fundraising events. So bake sales, anything where you're raising money for charity, or events where you will donate profits to an organization, we are not allowed to fund that. Reoccurring events such as an organization's normal meetings and events that occur outside of the funding period. So essentially, We can't fund events occurring during summer break. If you have an event occurring over winter break, apply for it as a fall expense. And then we can't cover shipping costs or tips, as those are not directly linked to your requested allocation item. And we can't fund operating expenses that only relate to your organization, such as national dues, website fees. And then any events that charge fees/money to full-time undergraduate students, we are not allowed to fund. Okay, so we just talked a lot about what we can't fund. So let's talk about what we can fund now. So for on-campus events, we could fund food, university expenses, performer/speaker fees, and materials that are integral to your event. So a good example of that is if you're having an event to teach pottery, which sounds awesome, you could apply to have the clay paid for. Also for on-campus events, if you have a speaker, you must have an all-inclusive contract, and if you are requesting to have coach/referee costs paid for, you must fill out a coaching contract, which is again available on the SOF webpage. So for capital goods, which must be related to your organization's purpose and or mission, here's good questions to ask yourself to figure out, is this something that MUSG will fund for me? Is your capital good needed to function as an organization? Meaning, if you do not have this capital good, will this prohibit your organization from achieving their goals? To be considered a capital good, it cannot be something that org members will have personalized or will be able to take with them after leaving the club. So a good example of this is jerseys with your name on the back of them, or books that members will keep for themselves. It should not be something that's asked for every single semester, and if the good will not be used for many years, it must be extremely important for the organization. So a good example of that is soccer balls for club soccer. And for off-campus events, for conferences, we could cover registration fees, lodging, or travel, or at least give you some money to cover those. And for service trips, tournaments, and other off-campus activities, we could fund travel, lodging, registration/entry fees, as long as they are open to all students and free, meaning they can't charge for students to attend. So I try to make that as simple as possible, but if it was confusing or if you have any questions, please just feel free to reach out if you're unsure if your event will qualify for funding. I've worked in the MUSG Finance Department for 3 years. I know this stuff pretty well now, so I'm more than happy to help you guys understand what we can't and can't fund for your organizations. So there are some on-campus events criteria. First, the event has to be open and free to all full-time undergraduate Marquette students. This year, your event, if it's on campus, also has to fulfill any COVID-19 requirements established by Marquette University. If you have any questions about that and what that means for your student org, please feel free to reach out to my team and we'll defer you to the right person. Also, your application must be complete. If anything's missing, I'll contact you through email, and then you'll have 48 hours to respond. If you take 49 hours to respond, that's okay. Just please get back to us as soon as you can, because we will be waiting for you. It also has to comply with our MUSG financial policies, and you will have to show that the representative from your student org was present at training. Other considerations to take into account. Your event should be beneficial to the Marquette community. It has to be fully planned, and outreach and public strategy should be focused towards the Marquette community. And your student org should be contributing to monetary expenses. Off-campus event criteria. Again, the event is open and free to all full-time students. The application is complete, has to comply with the MUSG financial policies. You need a representative SOF training, and really the thing that we ask for this is that you provide monetary cost per student to attend or participate in this event. So we kind of have that factor to take into consideration as well as an SOF committee. For your capital good requirement, same requirements as the off-campus, on-campus, but this time we really want to make sure that your item can be reused many times, and items that are used just once are not prohibited from funding. They're just highly discouraged, because the S committee, you're going to really have to prove to the SOF committee that this is a justifiable expense and you should take money out of your limited funds pool to give towards our organization to cover this expense. So fall 2020 office hours are by appointment in the MUHG office, AMU 133. If you'd like to set up a time, please just reach out to me or my finance team. We'd be happy to set that up with you. You could come into office hours at any point in the process if you have questions about what you're allowed to be funded for, what you're not allowed to fund for, if you have any questions about the form, or if you just want to prepare yourself and situate yourself best to fill out that reimbursement form. Please feel free. My team and myself are more than happy to help you guys in any way that we can. So, how to apply for funding. I know we talked about SOF a lot, and you guys are probably just waiting to know how can I get started. Dr. Jennifer Reed made a great video that is on our website that shows you guys step by step how to fill out applications start to finish, which is a great resource, and I would reference that multiple times throughout the process. But again, after watching that video, if you have any initial questions, feel more than free to reach out to me or my team. So like I previously said, the doctor made a video that's great on how to fill out your application, but there are a few things that you could do ahead of time to prepare yourself for success and make things as seamless as possible from the start of the process. So when you're preparing to submit a request for funding, you're going to want to make a grand master list of all the events, all the capital goods which you're going to request funding for. From there, you're going to take that list and break it into categories. So event 1, event 2, event 3, capital goods. And then under each of those headings, make a list of the items which you are seeking funding. So for our first event, we want to request the lodging expenses, conference registration fees, and gas. From there, you're going to gather proof of cost documentation, which I'll talk about later. And then you're going to reference this list when you're filling out your request form. And remember that you'll be asked to rank your items in order of priority/preference at the end of the request form. And what that means is sometimes when student orgs have a lot of requests for us, we're not able to fund all of them. So we'll do our best to fund fully your first priority, your second priority preference. And so it's much easier for you guys to tell us what's important as opposed to the SOF committee trying to figure out, what can we do to help serve this student org in the best way. And so when you're preparing to submit a request, this will really make a lot more sense once you're filling out that application. And I think there's great use in taking a few minutes ahead of time of filling out the application and just list this all out. So we talked about a good proof of cost. So when you're filling out your application, you're going to tell the SOF committee in your application what you'd like to apply for, and also how much you expect that cost to be. So a good example of a good proof of cost is the tennis balls that you could see on this screen. So if you're club tennis and you want to buy capital goods, you want to apply for tennis balls, love it, you're just going to need to set a good proof of cost. So you'd go on Amazon, you find that they are $11.99, and the thing with Amazon, the thing with carts, online even commerce sites allow you to have a shopping cart, is that once it's online, a lot of students will send us this screenshot. What I'm going to need you to do is add it to your cart and send us a screenshot of everything right before you do payment. That way it shows us just a little bit more detail from the website what exactly we expect to see paid for from you guys. And then a good proof of cost is semi-official, so don't worry if once you actually apply for reimbursement, it's a little bit different than what you say on your form. As long as it's in the same ballpark, as long as it's not crazy different, we understand that, the cost of things change over time. It shows the exact cost of what you're ordering, and it matches what you request on your application. So if you are requesting $12 for tennis balls, we're going to want to see that your proof of cost says $12, right? We don't want... So yeah, don't ask for more money than is in your proof of cost. And then for events, entry fees, you can see we have a Halloween annual event happening. Entry fee is $280, and this is a great example of what we need for event registration. And then we also have a great example of what it would look like if you're applying for hotel or lodging fees as well. If you have any questions about what a good proof of cost is, my finance team is really well trained on how to spot a good proof of cost and how to know when to look for more, so please reach out to them. So we talked about a good proof of cost. I want to talk about a bad proof of cost really quickly. So bad proof of cost is unofficial or a guesstimate. Doesn't clearly show cost and it doesn't match what you put in your application. So this Excel spreadsheet right here is in bad proof of cost because I don't really know where those numbers come from. It seems like someone really just said, I think gas will be 70, lodging, approximate that at 500 to 600. I don't really have any support here. If you want to do a spreadsheet, that's fine. You could do this. I would just in column C, sorry, you could do this for your own records, but I would just send us a screenshot of where you found out van rentals are $300, where you're getting gas is 70, and lodging being 500 to 600. The way of a screenshot of a multi-sport scoreboard, this shows your item, but it doesn't show a cost. So we have no idea how to approximate that. And then the last one kind of just says we think we'll spend $300 on food, and that's not a good proof of cost. So reimbursements, I talked a lot about how you could apply for funding, and I said at the end you will get reimbursed for that funding which you were allocated. So most funds that are allocated to a student org through SOF funding are awarded through a reimbursement process. The funds that a student organization are allocated are first paid by the student organization and then reimbursed by MUSG through a detailed reimbursement form. So like I said, the funds that student organizations are allocated are paid first by the student organization and then reimbursed by MUSG through a detailed reimbursement form. So again, to emphasize that, you won't receive your funding before your student organization makes that initial purchase. So your student organization will be allocated money, and so MUSG will say, hey, we'll give you XYZ amount of money for this capital good, but your student organization is still required to buy that capital good upfront from your student org's personal bank account or from the club's bank account. From there, you're going to fill out a reimbursement form, sending us your receipts saying, hey, we bought this. You said you give us $500. Here's the receipt showing that we paid $500 up front. We'd like to be reimbursed that money. So the detailed reimbursement form, I'm going to show you guys where that can be found later. But as events are occurring continuously, turn in your reimbursement request form. So if you were given funding for 3 different events, after event 1 happens, fill out the reimbursement form. Then when event 2 happens, fill out that reimbursement form. So fill it out as your events are happening. Please do not wait until the end of the semester and come to my team and say, here's 20 reimbursement forms I got throughout the semester. I don't think that would make anyone happy. And from your student org's perspective, it would take a much longer time for your student org to get reimbursed. So once you submit that form, the MUSG Finance Office reviews and processes the reimbursement request, and then we give it to Marquette University's Comptroller's Office, and they are the ones who authorize the reimbursement checks and then notify your group that it's ready for pickup. So all organizations have 30 days after the event/purchase to submit a reimbursement form. The reason we have this rule here is so that we can keep things timely and my office is able to know how much money we should expect to have in our SOF pool at the end of the semester. If you have any questions about reimbursement, I have a dedicated staff of 4 to help you guys. So please ask one of the MUSG financial assistants for help. You can email the office to schedule a one-on-one or to schedule a group session with me and an FOA, or you can just email them with questions you have. The MUSG financial office assistant hours are posted on the MUSG website. Again, here is their email, musg.finance@marquette.edu. Please approach my finance team with any and all questions you have. They're super friendly, made sure of that, and they will not turn you away with anything. And if you ask them something that they don't know the answer to themselves, because they don't know everything, they will contact me immediately and I'll get back to you as soon as I can with that information. So where to find the reimbursement form? Again, you're going to find that this SOF webpage is your best friend. The reimbursement form is under the appeal form as noted by the green arrow. So upfront costs, we talked about this a bit, talked about it in more detail on this slide. So the funds that a student organization are allocated are first paid by the student organization, then reimbursed by MUSG through a detailed reimbursement form. Here's a good picture of the reimbursement form for you guys, just have a little visual, but an exception would be any upfront costs. Like we said, upfront costs are
costs payable directly by MUSG. So this cost includes Sodexo catering, AMU technology, MUPD security, event management, publicity, or university approved vendors. And so this is great because when it's an upfront cost, you don't have to worry about it. Someone is going to pay for it upfront. Most times it'll be MUSG. Sometimes if it's a capital good, the Office of OEI will pay for that upfront, like I discussed previously. And invoices are necessary in applications for upfront costs. So if you have Sodexo catering and you want us to pay upfront, we're okay doing that. We just need to have an invoice so we know how much to pay them. If you have any questions about upfront costs, please just reach out and let us know. We'd be more than happy to answer that for you. University approved vendors. So expenses from university vendors are the only expenses that MUSG can pay directly. All other expenses must be purchased through the reimbursement process. It is highly recommended to use university vendors. Usage of a university vendor does not guarantee funding, but it makes life easier for the student org in the sense that you don't have to pay for that, as the university vendor will bill MUSG directly and you won't have to pay for that as long as you're allocated those funds. A quote/invoice is still required, and you could access a list through the MUSG website of university approved vendors. I would recommend at least trying to see whatever you would like to have provided for your student organization is available through a university approved vendor, because oftentimes they'll have better deals for you, better rates for you, because they are a university approved vendor. And you're going to have to be connected to the Market Wi-Fi or the VPN to access this page. And a good example of this is Sodexo.
So with your reimbursement form, there are some requirements we have to successfully process your form. And so if you have any questions about what documentation you need to have a successful form, please reach out to my finance team. Shoot them a quick email. Just say, hey, I'm having this event. I'm buying this good. I just want to double check what documentation do I need to make sure I get reimbursed. And my finance team will get back to you right away and tell you, you need this receipt, you need this contract, this is what you need to do. And so if you have a coach/ref/umphy, coaching contract is available on the MUSG website that is required for your form. If it's a gas receipt, if you want to be reimbursed for gas, we need photocopies of original receipts. If you are using Venmo to pay for anything, whether that's event registration or something else, that's okay as long as you provide us the right thing. So what we're going to need to see is either a bank statement showing, we pulled this much out of your bank account to pay for this Venmo transaction. That's one step. We're also going to need a screenshot of the party that you sent that Venmo transaction to. Just a screenshot from them saying, yes, this student org sent me this much money, and that's a Venmo transaction with events or conference registration. In addition, a bank activity showing funds leaving your account, we ask that you also send us a copy of the event confirmation email that verifies payment and reservation and attendance. And so that's just you guys showing us, yes, this money came out of my bank account. Here's an email saying I paid this much money. So we kind of connect those dots. And then you have a miscellaneous purchase. Providing an invoice as a backup to make sure the balance or net due says zero, or include a bank statement / screenshot of bank activity that shows the amount, clearly recognizable by description as a completed transaction. So in most instances, if you send us a bank statement and you say, I paid this much money, I paid $762 for this capital good, and then we compare that to your proof of cost, because we're expecting you to pay $762, we'll match those two up, and essentially the reimbursement form is just us confirming that you have paid for the good that you initially requested to be allocated funds for, and we just want to make sure we are reimbursing you for that exact good that we approved initially at the start of this process. And so really quickly, I just want to note that when you're sending an invoice, it's super important that we see a balance of zero, and that there is no outstanding debt. Because if we have an invoice that says you owe $250, there's nothing telling us that you actually paid that $250. So again, if you have any questions at all about the reimbursement form, do not hesitate to reach out to my finance team at musg.finance@mu.edu.
SOF resources. So everything you need to know before and during the SOF funding process. Office hours. They are by appointment, and you could either meet with myself or the finance team. If you have a reimbursement question, anyone on the finance team will be able to answer that for you or figure out the situation with you or walk you through your events or capital good process. If you have questions about filling out the application itself, I'd recommend reaching out to me personally, as I'd probably be able to help you best with that. Here's some more resources. Once the executive VP gets elected, that's their email. I've listed my email as well as my team's email, amirshi.finance@marquette.edu. And then the finance office hours will be posted on the SOF page, as well as all of the allocation forms that I talked about during this slideshow, this PowerPoint, and the university approved vendors are linked here, as well as a Sodexo grant application info form that is great to apply for if you would just like to apply for a grant from Sodexo to have them potentially cater one of your events. Thank you so much for sticking through this PowerPoint. I know that there's a lot of information covered, and I hope it was all good and relevant information to you and your student organization. On behalf of MUSG, thank you again, once again, for working with us. We are so excited to help serve you student orgs in the best way that we can. If you have any questions at all, I listed my email again down here, musg.fvp, and I also listed my cell phone number in case that's a preferred way of contact for some of you guys. Thanks so much, and let me know if you have any questions at all.